why we are labeling this particular presentation, Getting Off to a Strong Start. Here are the session outcomes. We want you to be able to identify needs or concerns as you begin your work. So what are the things that you need, or what are the things you're wondering about? And these are things you can talk about with your coaching coordinator in your meetings today, or ask questions of me that I could answer later. And we want you to really leave here with a plan of how you're going to initiate or continue to build positive collaborations with principals and with teachers. As the year begins, I think it's important that new coaches really focus on 5 things. Your own professional learning, because as we saw in our poll yesterday, for many of you, this is your first year of coaching, and for others, it's only your second year of coaching. So there's still a lot of professional learning about coaching and about the essentials that you'll want to do. As we saw in the chat this morning, people are starting to make those lists of things they want to do, and your list will get to 25 before you'll say, "Ooh, this is way too many. I think I need to prioritize my top 3, as somebody said." And I think that's really important to remember. It's a lot of things that you could do, but let's prioritize. The second thing is we really want to focus on your discussions with your principal, because we learned yesterday how the principal is really the foundation of most coaching programs. We need their support, we need their understanding, we need their participation. The third thing that you can focus on as you begin the year are those informal interactions with teachers and students, and also beginning to examine curricular materials that maybe you didn't use as a teacher, or you didn't use because you're in a different school. And then finally, if you have this opportunity, and many of you do because you're in ISD now with other coaches, other ISD coaches, is to shadow an experienced ISD coach and see what life looks like for somebody who's been in a role similar to yours in the past. So those are the things that I think that we should focus on. That's what this presentation is going to focus on. So the first one is to focus on your own professional learning, whether it be in a small group. In this picture, they're doing some learning, they're analyzing student work, and they're practicing some coaching conversations, so they get some practice before they go actually in and talk to teachers. So these are all the kinds, just a few of the kinds of professional learning that you might want to start thinking about. The Early Literacy Coaching Network has a trajectory of professional learning. It talks about first onboarding, then working with instructional modules, going on to some online study groups. After a year of coaching, certainly we'd love to have most of you come to an intensive coaching institute where you actually work with teachers in a school around a topic, a literacy topic, and you work with other coaches to do some peer coaching. And finally, number 5 is really separate. It's ongoing network and literacy learning, which you're starting today, but you'll continue on as you go to the quarterly meetings in October, as you go to the August Advanced Institute, so that there's always ongoing network and literacy learning for everybody. So let's just say that yesterday, today, and tomorrow, we're in that first stage of the trajectory where you're entering the live learning sessions in collaboration with researchers. So you're learning a lot about the essential instructional practices as well as the essential coaching practices. However, you've heard a lot about the instructional modules and the coaching modules. And this is the second part of the trajectory, things that you are going to want to go through, and hopefully with your coaching coordinator or another a coach who hasn't gone through them yet in this first part of the year. It takes time to go through these. And that's why we say there's a real focus on professional learning during these first couple of months of your work. And it should be in your schedule, not something to do when you get home at night. So that's something we all have to remember, is to schedule this professional learning into our calendars. And I believe that later this morning, there's a session where somebody's going to show you how to get to all these resources. Is that correct, Erin? Is that session still on today?
It might not be today. I want to talk with you about that, but we definitely will. We will give a little tutorial on that here this week.
Alrighty, sounds good. So as you focus on these practices, just know that there are 4 modules for the essential coaching practice. We put some together. There's an introduction, and then the first one on the fact that coaches need expertise. Essentials 2 and 3 on adult learning principles and gaining rapport. Essentials 5 and 6 on spending the majority of your time with teachers and engaging in activities that predict student achievement. And then essentials 4 and 7 that really talk about more global school-wide things, such as working with your principal and being a literacy leader. So there's 4 modules in the coaching practices and 10 modules on the instructional practices. And those are certainly things that you're going to want to go through as you enter these next few months. Now there's 10 essential instructional practices, and we always say, let's get the biggest bang for your buck. So if you know that your school is working on writing, it would probably behoove you to start with essential 6, which is writing. If you know your school, one of your school's goals is small group work, then you might start with essential 3. So you're really gaining expertise around small group lessons. So really think about, what order you want to do them in. You don't necessarily have to start with 1 and go to 10, but map it on to the essentials that the schools in which you are working are using at the moment. So as I said, I think that the rest of September, and I'm sure the early part of September and October, are really times to build a foundation for coaching. And one of the things that you're going to do is your initial work with the principal. And we talked about this yesterday, and it seemed like people were really starting to have really good relationships with their principal in terms of building a shared understanding of the coaching program between you and the principal. And already maybe there are some things that you're going to have to go back and talk about after you have this session for these 3 days and meet with your coaching coordinator. Maybe there's just certain things that you and your principal are going to have to talk about to revise that your shared understanding a little bit. That's always good. You always want to have a clear description of the coaching program and have it shared with the teachers. And you want to set regular meeting times with the principal. Oftentimes, and I'm sure this happened, your coaching coordinator goes with you to the first meeting just to help clarify the role of the ISD coach and respond to any questions that you as a new coach might not know the answers to, but the principal asks, and then there's somebody at the meeting who really can come in with those answers. So if you haven't had a really intense meeting with the principal yet, this is a good time to set those up. It's also important to set up those regular meeting times with the principal. We always suggest once a week, but it typically sometimes is once every 2 weeks. Set it up, and as a coach, do not ever cancel those meetings. If the principal has to cancel the meeting, that's a different thing, but if you shouldn't be the person to cancel the meeting. So set up the time and be there. And if it turns out that there's too many times when the principal has to cancel, you might have to sit with that principal and say, this time doesn't seem to work for you. Is there a better time in the week when we can set up a meeting time? So I just, these are things that you want to do during your initial work with the principal. And I wanted to show you, because many of you may not have looked at the administrator video that we developed. It's called Supporting Literacy Coaching, Answers to Frequently Asked Questions by Michigan School Administrators. There's 7 frequently asked questions. Some of them have to do with the research. So if you really want to hit home about what is the research about coaching and how it impacts students, there's a question about that we answer. The one, this question that we're going to show now is, it's question 5. So we'll see exactly what it is. I think it's how can principals support coaching? So you all have access to this video, and the access is shown. So it would be optimal for coaches to be duty-free at these times. Okay. Finally, it is problematic to have coaches spend part of their day providing interventions for students. Time spent on interventions reduces the total amount of time they have for coaching. It also limits opportunities to do in-depth coaching with teachers who are giving literacy instruction during the time when the coach is providing interventions. That's the end of question 4. Earlier, you saw how the literacy coaching model positions administrators as the foundation of effective coaching programs. This leads to our 5th question. How can administrators support literacy coaching? Research provides some specific ways principals can encourage teachers to participate in coaching and to support coaches in their work. Your communications are key. Communication is especially important at the beginning of a new literacy coaching program and at the beginning of every year when you describe and endorse the focus of the coaching program and the roles of the coach, carefully explaining that the coach is not an evaluator. When teachers see that you value the coaching program and view the coach as a valuable resource, they are more likely to participate in coaching. Research also indicates that teachers are more likely to participate in coaching when encouraged to do so by the principal. Principals can certainly find opportunities during faculty meetings and professional development sessions to encourage teachers to engage with the literacy coach. Let's look at an example of how a principal can also encourage a teacher to work with a coach after observing in that teacher's classroom. A principal might recommend that the teacher ask the coach for support regarding a specific literacy practice. After the teacher and coach meet to develop a goal and plan of action, the teacher sends an email to the principal summarizing the steps that the teacher and coach plan to take. This example represents a model for communication between principals, teachers, and coaches. Notice that in this model, the principal does not directly ask the coach to work with a teacher, nor does the coach discuss specific teachers with the principal. Principals also show their support for literacy coaching through their actions. Principals demonstrate that they value coaching by participating in large group professional learning facilitated by the coach, and by observing the coach model lessons in various classrooms. In addition, principals support coaching by providing the time and resources for coaching activities. Coaches often say that the biggest way principals can support coaching is by providing common planning time for each grade level at least 1 or 2 days a week, as well as to communicate the expectation that these common planning times should be facilitated by the coach for the purpose of strengthening core literacy instruction. These scheduled, ongoing common planning times help teachers strengthen their data analysis, instructional planning, and reflective skills, and they foster a sense of collective responsibility for students' progress. It's important for principals and coaches to meet on a regular basis, every week or every other week. And it's important that the teachers know what happens at these meetings, information that principals can include in their description of the program at the beginning of each year. During their meetings, principals and coaches often examine student data and teacher surveys to determine what professional learning around literacy would be beneficial to all teachers or to groups of teachers. Coaches also provide a general overview of their coaching work since the last meeting and how they are progressing with their own coaching goals. It is critical to remember that principals and coaches should not discuss concerns about individual teachers. If teachers know or believe that principals and coaches are having conversations about individual teachers, it can erode the trust that coaches have so carefully built with teachers. So I hope that gives you just a flavor of the kind of information that's on the administrator video. And when it is aimed at administrators, so it talks about you as the principal. You can look at the other 6 questions when you have time and see if there are some that really apply to you. I think that sometimes having that third point in front of you where you don't have to say all of that to the principal, but somebody else is saying it to the principal, and then you can discuss it, such as, we don't have common planning time right now, but maybe as we start planning for next year in March, we could start to have some common planning time, especially around those grade levels that I know that I will be coaching with. It's also good to start thinking about what your response is going to be to a principal when the principal starts talking about a teacher and asks for your support in that. You know, what kind of coaching language are you going to use to talk to the principal about that? And also, how do you catch yourself when you start to say something like, oh, I was in Marissa's room and she just did such a wonderful thing? Because if the principal goes to Marissa and says, oh, I heard about the wonderful things that you're doing, it sounds like it's good, but really Marissa's thinking, well, if she's talking to the principal about the wonderful things I'm doing, maybe she's talking to the principal about some of the things I'm not doing so well. So it's really tricky. You want to not really talk about individual teachers with the principal, be it really exciting things or not so exciting things. You can find other ways, such as asking the teacher to talk to the principal about what she's doing with her students around a certain topic that you've been coaching with, or you could ask the teacher to share a success at a faculty meeting. Those kinds of things, then it becomes much more public, and you're not doing the sharing, the teacher's doing the sharing. So things to think about as you start to work with teachers and you want to build that trust and confidentiality. So you might want to use a template like this to set up your meeting. I think that coaches have found it really helpful to send a template like this to the principal before every single meeting that they have, especially if they meet once every 2 weeks. Your coaching considerations might be different, but it lets the principal know, okay, today we're going to talk about the most recent assessment data, or today we're really going to talk about professional development that's coming up in a couple of months, and what is it going to look like. So at the beginning of the year, you might have some considerations like this. If you're in more than one building, which I hope you're not in more than 2 buildings, when will you be in the building? What days? And make sure that it's aligned to literacy instruction time, so that you're actually in the building when people are doing literacy. What are your initial ideas for coaching priorities? You want to know, if you don't already know, what are the school-wide goals? Well, and what has been done in relation to that? And what is the data that is supporting those school-wide goals, and what does that look like? Then you can have a list of other issues to be discussed. If you haven't already rolled out coaching to the staff, then you can discuss when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it. You know, are you both going to take different parts and share that discussion with the teachers? Who's going to take the lead? It should be the principal, because we know that the principal is really important. And so if the principal takes the lead in sharing the coaching program, that means he or she knows about the coaching program and supports it and endorses it, and then establish that regular meeting time. But as I said, as you go along, your meeting template can change, and maybe those, maybe you can talk to your coaching coordinator about nice templates that some of the other coaches have used for their coaching meeting. It's really nice to have this and to keep notes, so that you know from one time to the next what you've already discussed. And you can always bring some things back, saying, well, we discussed this a couple of weeks ago, and this is what we came to, but now new data indicates maybe that we should change our focus a little bit, or whatever. So you want to really keep good notes on what your meetings are about. One of the things that I recommend that you do in September and October is to observe in every single classroom, that K through 3 classroom, or whatever classrooms you're assigned to work in. Why are these initial observations important? Well, I don't, especially most of you who are new and are coming from the classroom, if you've been a 3rd grade teacher for 4 or 5 years, you probably know the 3rd grade curriculum really well. You may have even observed your peers and know kind of what the differences are in your routines and how the curricular materials are used a little differently at 3rd grade. But do you know that for kindergarten, for 1st, for 2nd? So these initial observations allow you to understand the curriculum across the grades that you're coaching. And it's really important that you not just look at the curricular materials, which is important, but that you see the use of those curricular materials in action, because teacher A in 2nd grade may use the curricular materials a little bit differently than teacher B. On the other hand, if it's a really strong grade level team, you might go into teacher A on day 1 and teacher B on day 1 and see almost the same lesson. So it's really important to look at the curricular materials in action, just to get a feel for students at different grade levels. So your mindset on 3rd grade, kindergarten students are a lot different, and 1st grade students are a lot different, and what routines teachers are using across the grade levels. So this is important to do. Even if you've been teaching in that building, you probably don't know the curriculum throughout all the grades in that building. So that's why these are important. How do you prepare for these observations? Well, the first thing you do is you get support from the principal. You explain to the principal, why are you going in for these observations? And it's not to really develop ideas for coaching with individual teachers. It's not evaluation for sure. It's just to get a good feel of what's going on in the building. And the principal then, hopefully, can send out a little email saying, so-and-so is planning to come in to do observations in order to learn more about the curriculum and see how it's enacted and learn about our students and our routines at the school. And she or he is going to come and find a good time to meet with you. Please sign up to meet with the for an observation for the coach to be able to visit your classroom. That is the best thing. Sometimes principals take it upon themselves to set up the schedule and just let the teachers know the coach will be in on these days. So whatever works, but we always know that sometimes it's good just to have the principal endorse it and the coach set up the schedule. Try to do multiple observations in a room, because what you see on one day, if you go into a reading lesson on Monday and that teacher's following a core curriculum, it might look the same on every Monday, but it would look different if you went in on a Wednesday. So try to do multiple observations if possible. And then you want to follow up after the observations with a quick email, a quick comment, something like that. But you have to be very careful with these initial emails that you send or notes that you leave on the desk, because remember, you went in for your own professional learning. You didn't go in because the teacher asked you to observe a certain student or whatever. So let's look at some emails and help you think about which of these emails would really be the best emails to send. So I'm going to read the first one, and Erin's going to react to it as if she were the teacher. It says, I've been in Sienna's classroom. It says, "Thanks for welcoming me into your classroom today. I enjoyed watching 3 small group lessons. As I observed, I noticed several children who were supposed to be working on their own, but were not making the best use of their time. Perhaps this is something we can address as we work together this year. Chris." So Erin, you're Sienna. You get this email from Chris, who's been in your classroom. What are you thinking as you read this note or email?
Well, at the beginning, I'm appreciating the specificity. It's helpful that Chris reminded me of what was going on, 3 small group lessons. As I observed, then it starts to move into something that it was like, wow, if you are just coming into my classroom, do you really know all that I was thinking about if the students were using the time wisely or not? I would hope that in the future, Chris would ask me what I thought about student engagement and the different, efforts I've already made around student engagement and the plans I might have for students. But as I read this, I kind of think, even that last sentence, perhaps this is something we can address. I mean, that feels like a principal who just came to the building coming in for walkthroughs and assuming that they know about my work and my history and my goals and my intentions, which are inside. And if you don't talk to me, you don't know. So I feel like there's some assumptions here, and I do not feel excited about my next conversation with Chris.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So, and yes, and especially if if Sienna's been informed that you're really there to look at curricular materials and how they're being put into action, and just get a feel for students, what are second grade students like, what are first grade students like. So yeah, probably not the best note to leave after one of these observations. So now I'd like you to look at the number 2 and 3 and read them and decide which one would you use, which of these notes might you leave if you were Chris, and why, and which one might you not use and why. So let's just kind of read through them and then put in the chat which ones you would or would not use and why. Just take a couple of minutes to have some responses in the chat. So it looks like to me that almost everybody is going to use number 2 because it's welcoming. It shows that what they saw, that focuses on the curricular materials, and just talking about in the future, I really want to get to know more about you and your students, and so it's as somebody wrote here, it values the teacher. It talks about it's a good start for relationship building. So number 2 doesn't really have anything that would set up red flags for the teacher as I see it. Somebody said number 3, teacher wasn't asking for those opinion. Has a suggestion right away with some assumptions that she may have not discussed with the teacher over here in number 3. Wondered if the students had selected the books they were reading. Well, I mean, these are the kinds of things you have pretty in-depth discussions with as you're talking about essential instructional practice number 1 under motivation. And I think that whoever was talking about number 3 here, that it really is getting to things that the teacher wasn't expecting that the coach was going to do on these observations. So you have a really good feel for what these notes should look like. I always recommend that you write down your notes, you look at them carefully, because teachers really read them carefully. We found out in our institutes when we write little notes when the facilitators of the institutes write little notes to the coaches, they take them very seriously and they kind of read them word by word. And I think teachers do that too when they get a note from somebody. It's great communication, but so take the time to reread it and think about it from the teacher's viewpoint. If I were a teacher getting this note, how would I feel about it? And especially for the specific purpose for which I am writing this note and for why I made that observation. So I think that your thinking processes are really good ones as you went through to decide whether you were going to do 2 or 3, and the number 2 is the one that really fits the purpose of the observation the best and sets up for future work as well. We're going to talk a little bit about interacting with teachers, and yesterday you shared some of the ways that you were already doing initial interactions with teachers, but they are so important because they build credibility with teachers. They build credibility for you as a teacher when you're modeling things, and as a coach. So it also enables students to become familiar with you. So if you end up going into those classrooms to doing some modeling, co-teaching later on during the coaching cycle, you won't be a stranger. They'll know that who you are, why you're part of the school. And it'll just be much easier to work with students if you've had some initial interactions with them. So we're talking about low stress ways to interact with teachers and students. And yesterday you shared so many good ideas about things you were already doing. So in the following slides, you're going to see some of the ways that coaches that in the past have reported using to start develop those good relationships with teachers. And you're going to see how many of those ideas on these slides actually mirror what you said yesterday. But I think it's important to think about the purpose of some of these things as well. So one of the things that I don't think I saw yesterday is that it's always a good idea to attend some grade level meetings as an interested learner, an active listener. So you want to find out, what are the concerns and the goals of this group, and how do they spend their grade level meeting time? Are they really focused on some literacy aspect? Are they focused on students? Or are they focused on the logistics of things like the upcoming field trip, a parent night, those kinds of things? So you get a feel for what these grade level meetings look like. You also really get a good feel for the dynamics of the group. You know, you could go into maybe a first grade group and they're really working hard together to build lessons together, to make sure they're following the curriculum well. And then you go into the third grade team and you see maybe that they, in fact, are not on the same page in terms of the curriculum. Some people are using this and some people are using that. And so their discussions are a little bit different. So you get to know the group dynamics of a grade level team. And you also get to see who are the teacher leaders across the teams. It becomes very evident who's kind of running the show and who's really not contributing as much and why. So it's really important to really scope out some of those teacher leaders who might help you in the future facilitate professional learning or actually just share ideas at a faculty meeting. So there's a lot of good reasons to attend the grade level meetings as an interested learner, not necessarily to facilitate them at this particular time. But if somebody at that meeting were to ask you a question, of course, you're going to give your best response. Some of you talked about read alouds yesterday, and I think that we call it providing crunch time support at the very beginning of the year or even around report card time. Sometimes it's really good just to offer to go into a classroom and say, you know, if you need some extra time to assess a new student or to really analyze, get all of your assessments together, your assessment data together, I'd be happy to come in and do a read aloud with the students while you're doing that. This isn't really to model a reading aloud for the teachers. It's really to give the teachers the time they need to do something that they really couldn't do if they didn't have that support. Now, you don't want to do that a lot, but at the beginning to try to build some rapport, it's really a good idea. It's also, you can also, I don't know in your schools, but some of the schools I've been working in, we have been using a lot of the money from COVID to purchase additional books for classroom libraries. And sometimes the teacher just needs somebody to help code the books, however they're doing it, by theme or by genre, and add them to the library. And it's something the teacher doesn't have enough time to do. So maybe you could spend a half an hour doing that in somebody's room and they really appreciate it. You can also at that time then find 2 or 3 books, maybe that you want to do book talks on, and kind of model how to do good book talks for teachers. And also that helps the students know what they want to read. Several of you yesterday talked about the fact that sometimes you found specific resources requested by the teacher. Now, you know, this is kind of when teachers are in this, I need it tomorrow kind of situation. They say, I'm working on summarization. Do you have a really good graphic organizer for that? I don't really like the ones I'm using. And this again is where your expertise as a coach might come in, because you have a number of different things and you can say, how about this or this or this? So there are times when it's really important to provide those resources, but also to tell teachers where they can find similar resources. You know, I found these in this particular professional book, or I found this on the Institute of Education Science website. So find specific resources requested by the teacher. Teachers really appreciate knowing that you are a co-learner with them. And so it's important to express a desire to expand your own learning and experience, to show that you want to continue growing in your own knowledge and skills. It's a great way to get into the classroom. For example, say you were a 3rd grade teacher and you had worked on developing reading goals for your with your students, but you hadn't really seen that done in first grade before. And so you heard that one of the first grade teachers was working with her students to develop their own reading goals. You could say something like, you know, I heard you were working on reading goals, and our team, when we were in third grade, did it with third graders, but I really can't envision what it looks like with first graders. So would it be okay if I came in one day when you're setting goals with some students? And I'd just like to see that process and see what it looks like with a different age level of students. And that really shows respect for the teacher, values what the expertise that teacher is using with their students, and shows your desire to expand your own knowledge. Another way is to examine curricular materials, to become familiar with materials that are required and materials that are optional. It's very interesting that I was in a building once, and a whole grade level really did not like this particular curricular material that they were using. They said, but we have to use it. And I was just talking to the principal, and I said, this particular curricular material seems to be problematic for teachers in this way, but they feel they're required to use it, are they? And the principal looked at me and said, no, they're not. It's just a curricular material that we purchased at one time. And if they don't think it is aligned with our curriculum or our goals anymore, let's look for some materials that could. It is not a required material. But I think that lots of times when you have curricular materials in your building, teachers think that they have to be used, and they have to be used in a certain way. And sometimes that isn't really the case, or how the principal sees it. Could be that a different principal was in the building when the curricular materials were ordered, and this principal doesn't really know that that's the viewpoint of the teacher. Or maybe the principal really just purchased it to be helpful, and they really weren't required. So really become familiar with that, and don't just rely on the teachers to tell you, yep, we all have to use it. Because in some cases you find out, nope, they all don't have to use it. And then I think it's good to start critically mapping some of those materials to the essential instructional practices and the learning standards. I'm not saying that right now you're going to take what you find and talk to teachers about it, but it's good for you to start thinking about, how do these curricular materials map onto what we're talking about in the learning standards, and how do they fit in, these materials fit in, say, the phonics and phonemic awareness materials? How do they fit in with what I learned when I went through the modules for instructional practices 4 and 5? So really start thinking about that, get that mindset about how do these materials align with important research supported things. And the last thing is to shadow an experienced coach. I think that this is really an important thing. You begin to understand the variety of activities in which you may engage. Maybe you were thinking that as a coach, you're going to do this and this and this, and then you go out and spend a couple of days with an experienced coach, and you realize that they are engaging with teachers in ways that you hadn't thought of, but that were very productive, and that really fostered student growth, some of those predictors of student achievement. So it's really important to kind of just look and see what somebody who's in your role, a similar role to yours, is doing on a daily basis. It's also important to just listen to the coaching language that coach uses with teachers, and kind of steal some of those good ideas about coaching language from your peers. And sometimes what works for that coach as good coaching language might not work in your style. So you have to think about, what is this something I would feel comfortable saying, or how would I say it a little bit differently? But it's good to hear somebody else's coaching language and think about it. The other thing is, it's wonderful to have time to debrief with an experienced coach about something that you both have seen. Remember that we want teachers to become really good decision makers. So what we're really thinking about here is talking to the coach about what decisions did you make when you had this conversation with this teacher? Or what decisions did you make when you started modeling and or co-teaching? What kinds of things did you have to change when you were co-teaching? It really gives you an opportunity to talk to somebody else about the practice that you are going to be doing, sometimes all by yourself without a great deal of support on a daily basis. So it's important to have those opportunities to debrief with an experienced coach. It's also good to see some of the materials that they use when they conference with teachers to prepare for modeling, to prepare for co-teaching. You know, what are you using? What can I steal from you in terms of templates that that would work for me? So shadowing an experienced coach, if you say, I'm going to spend 2 or 3 days with somebody on different days when they're doing different things, I think is still a really good use of your time during September and October. So yesterday we looked at the coaching model, and it said that you're supposed to spend the majority of your time working with teachers and planning that work. But if you're a new coach in September and October and into November, your time allocation is not going to look like that, because you're going to spend a lot of time on professional learning. These 3 days, the quarterly, other meetings with your coordinator. So time to look at those instructional modules and the coaching modules. Lots of your time is going to be on professional learning right now, or should be. You're still, all those ways of interacting with teachers, going into classrooms and read alouds and crunch time and all those, that gives you that 30% of working and preparing to work with teachers. And then probably not a lot on leadership activities right now, unless you're on a building leadership team, or you're on a curriculum committee, which is great to be on a literacy curriculum committee. And then there's these other activities over there that just happen as you start coaching, you know, looking at curricular materials, meeting with the principal, meeting with other professional staff. Sometimes you're in a building where there's a math coach, a tech coach. Now we have SEL coaches. So just getting to know what their roles are and how you're not going to step on each other's toes, that kind of thing, how you're going to work together. So this is really much more what you might expect your days to look like, I think, in September, October, early November. But it will change as the year goes on. I think the sixth question on that video for administrators called Supporting Literacy Coaching is, what special considerations need to be made with a new literacy coach? And it talks about a lot of these things, about how the principal should realize that you're going to be observing. The principal should realize that you're going to be looking at materials, and that you're not going to start coaching cycles on day 3. So it's, if you are worried that the principal might not understand this when you explain it to them, maybe you want to show them question 6 from the administrator video about what special considerations need to be made with a new literacy coach. We're not going to look at it today, but now that you have the Vimeo URL and you know that the password is capitalized Mesa, you can look at all of those questions and decide which ones might be most beneficial for you. So we've talked about the fact that at this beginning of this year, you're going to work on your professional development. You're going to make classroom observations. You're going to look at curriculum materials. You're going to shadow an experienced coach. And what I'd like to know now is, in terms of all of these things, what support might be most beneficial to you? And so there's a poll question, and it talks about what do you think you're going to need the most support with? Understanding your role as a coach, different from maybe your previous role, how to plan the initial meeting with principals, how to gain access into classrooms, how to interact with teachers, how to examine curricular materials, or how to shadow. Which of these do you think you're going to need support from the ISD coaching coordinator or principal? So I'm launching this just to get and only coaches, not coaching coordinators, new coaches, not the coaching coordinators, need to respond. So we'll see what this looks like. So if we look at this, it looks like many of you feel like you're set to go with your principals, which is wonderful. But a third of you really want to think about how you're going to gain access to the classroom. So that's kind of going back to the principal. You're not planning an initial meeting, but you're going to go back to the principal. Thinking about what are the best ways for you to interact with teachers. Some of the things that you heard yesterday, you saw yesterday in the chat, some of the things I talked about today. And a lot of you, more than half of you, want to examine curriculum materials. And I'm sure that your coaching coordinator and other coaches can help you think through the process of how you're going to do that. It takes some time to really look at those materials and map them back onto the essential instructional practices and the learning standards even. And then because you're working with a coaching coordinator, you probably are going to have to talk to that coordinator about setting up times to shadow an experienced coach. Who is that coach going to be? What days am I going to do it? How am I going to let the principal know what I'm going to do? Why I'm not going to be in the building on those days. So it looks like everybody has something that they're going to be working on that they might need a little support from either their principal or the coaching coordinator. So we're done. You've successfully completed September and October, and you're starting now to move into November and December. And so you're going to continue to move forward. You're going to think about, remember we had that meeting with the principal about our coaching focus and about maybe who's going to participate, which grade levels are going to participate, not individual teachers necessarily. And we have to revisit that in November. So let's assume then that you have decided that you've looked at the school goals and they really are working on comprehension strategies. They feel like that's where their students need more work, is on comprehension. And so you know that there is this wonderful guide from the Institute of Education Sciences, IES, called Improving Reading Comprehension in Kindergarten through Third Grade. And there are certain strategies that are research-based strategies that have been found to be very helpful in terms of comprehension. And you know you're going to work with the second and third grade teams maybe on this, because those are the students where the data is showing that comprehension is in an area of need. And teachers acknowledge that they really need to focus more, have a really strict focus on comprehension now. And so that you have to figure out, maybe the second grade team really wants to work on questioning. And here there's a description of what questioning is and a couple of activities that suggest how you could do it. Whereas the third grade team really wants to work on summarizing and retelling, especially in writing. And there's a couple of activities here. Not the be all and end all of these activities, but just to get you thinking and to using some research-based ideas. So let's say that you are going to do that and you're going to use that layered approach. You might have a K-3 session on comprehension for all of K-3, And then, as I said, you're going to go into that small group coaching at the grade level. And then maybe, let's just look at this grade level coaching for a minute. You're using your data analysis to drive instruction. So the second grade teachers have realized the students aren't really good at questioning. And so you're doing some pre-assessment data to take some notes about what kinds of questions the teacher's asking, what are the responses that the students are giving, and what kind of follow-up questions is the teacher using in relationship to those responses. So you have some pre-instruction data to go on and to build your work, to build your instructional practices around. Maybe in the third grade, you're having students complete a graphic organizer to summarize the what they're working on. And you're looking at what are they missing in their summarization that then you're going to work on with the teacher to help students improve their summarization. So the grade level coaching might be that you're going to co-plan lessons after you've done this data analysis. And the lessons are going to follow that gradual release of responsibility, where you're helping the teacher model whatever she's doing with the students, helping the teacher decide what kinds of guided practice the students need, guided by the teacher, or guided practice amongst two students where they're working together, and then moving into independence. So you're thinking about co-planning lessons and how those lessons fit into the gradual release of responsibility model. You're helping teachers select appropriate materials for those lessons that they're developing during grade level meetings. And you're helping them determine what kind of assessments are we going to use at the end to see if students have improved in their ability to answer questions or lead discussions, or in the case of the third grade team, write a better retell or summarization. So these are all the kinds of things that can be done at the grade level if you're planning some lessons together, and then everybody's going to implement those lessons. You can implement them and then get back as a grade level and reflect on them. So that's grade level coaching, where everybody is really involved, and you can reinforce the idea of using appropriate materials and assessments during your instruction. Of course, you want to have an agenda for these grade level teams. So like today, we are going to finish the lesson plan for this, and always keep a record of your outcomes and your next steps, and always have a set of group norms that you go over when you meet with them. Even though they know the group norms by heart, it's always good to start out with them so people can, okay, I've left my students in music and I've come to this grade level team meeting for 40 minutes, and I'm going to maintain a focus on this topic that we're working on. We're going to develop this lesson plan. We're going to listen to each other. We're going to ask people who aren't contributing much to contribute. And we're going to always be respectful of our peers. So it's always really good to go over those, because teachers are transitioning from working with students back to working with their colleagues. And then thinking about those grade levels where you develop lesson plans, then here comes the individual coaching. Maybe there's a second grade teacher and a third grade teacher who would like support in implementing those lesson plans. Maybe they'd like you to model one of those lesson plans so that the next week they can implement a similar lesson plan that has been written on their own. So certainly you can offer support for the implementation of these lessons. You can model, you can co-teach, you can observe. And by doing these things, you're maintaining an emphasis on the activities that predict student learning. Conferencing, when you're meeting with the whole team, and with individual teachers, co-planning, modeling, observation, and you're really looking at assessment data to drive your instruction. Now, you may have this question about, you may have this question about, can you ever coach a teacher on a topic that's not tied to the school's goals or initiative? I would say in November and December, the answer is yes, you could. Because you're still trying to build this rapport and develop relationships. And so if a teacher says, I know the school is really working on writing, but right now I'm a little stumped on how to do small group work in reading. And that's what I really, really want help with. Or I know that the school is working on writing, but my students really are having trouble talking to each other and having a discussion without me leading every little piece of it. That's what my students really need to start doing. So I think in November and December, it's okay to say, okay, you really, this is not really aligned with the school-wide goal, but it's a really relevant thing to you. It's, remember those adult learning principles is super relevant to you, and it's solving a problem that you have, and you are being engaged, you're being involved in the planning of the work that we do together. So yes, we can work on one of those things. The nice thing is at the end of that cycle that you do based on what the teacher really has asked for support in, is that maybe you can make a switch to the school-wide goal in an easy way. For example, if this teacher says, I really want to work on small group reading instruction, well, think of how that really just moves right into small group writing instruction. So you can say, some of the things that we've been working on in reading now, you can just move right into that writing instruction. Let's maybe work together on that. Then you get back onto the school-wide goal. So yes, it's okay at the very beginning, but you want to quickly make sure that your coaching is aligned with a larger initiative, a school-wide goal, a grade level team goal, something like that. But I'm not saying you could never do it on a topic that the teacher is really passionate about and really wants support on. So what I'd like you to do, Erin, can we go into a short breakout session?
Yes, I have breakout rooms ready.
Okay, so we're going to share ways that grade level or individual coaching has worked for you as a participant or as a coach. And think about what additional ideas discussed today might work for you this fall. So it's just kind of a way to kind of think through some of the things I've talked about this morning and share your ideas with a few others. Just have one person start and make sure everybody in the group has an opportunity to share. We'll spend about 7 minutes. So are there about 4 people in the group? So there were some interesting conversations in some of the rooms that I was listening to, and one of the things that came up is in both of the rooms I was in was, I have a lot of buildings. I have 2 buildings, I have 4 buildings. So how am I going to do that? And typically what principals want is they want to see you in their building 1 day a week, because that means coaching is going on. But we all know that when we look at instruction, if you're there every Monday, it's really hard to really focus on small group instruction, right? Because small group instruction happens every day. You need to be in the building for a long group of time if you're really going to coach on small group instruction. Now, maybe for this first part of the year, it's okay to go from building to building because you're observing, you're shadowing, those kinds of things. But just a couple of suggestions. If you have 4 buildings, it could be that you're only going to be in 2 buildings for 6 weeks during their times. And then you're going to, at the end of those 6 weeks, get those teachers that you've been working with set up for what they're going to do next. and go on to the next two buildings. It's not an easy sell to lots of principals, but it really works better if you can be in a building for a long block of time once you start coaching teachers on a regular basis. Otherwise, you might co-plan on Monday with a teacher, but you can never observe her do the lesson because the lesson's going to be on Tuesday or Wednesday and you're in a different building on that day. So some of this you really have to think through carefully about what it is you're doing and how you can make good use of your time and not just be present in the building. Having a coach walk down the hall and meet with teachers once a week is not going to lead to student learning. Just isn't. So you need that intensive interaction with teachers, regular interaction over a sustained period of time. 4 to 5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. You can work it out so you can make sure that you're giving equal attention to the buildings if that's what the issue is. But there are other ways of giving equal attention than 1 day a week here and 1 day a week there. So that was one of the biggies that I heard a lot about. So you saw this earlier that in October, November, this is kind of what your schedule is going to look like. But it's going to change. This particular documentation of time is really optimal. This is a time when a coach has gotten their schedule together, maybe February, March of next year, April, where you're spending a lot of time working and preparing to work with teachers. All that blue is where you're working with teachers so that students can learn. You have some leadership activities, a little bit of professional learning, like once you get into January, February, you're not going to be able to spend as much time on professional learning as you're doing in the fall. And so this is what it looks like. In this case, it was 60% of the time working with teachers, 20% on leadership, 13 on professional development, and 7 on these other things that happen that you can't avoid. So this is a nice goal, but remember, in December, you might be looking at your time, you might be only working more like this. And so you're going to make a goal that by February, the end of February, you're going to be spending 40% of your time working and preparing to work with teachers and a little bit less time on professional learning. So every time you look at how much time you're spending working with teachers, want to raise it just a little bit, and you can raise it by reducing the amount of time on professional learning and looking at some of these other activities and saying, how high priority are they? Is there somebody else who can do them? Do they need to be done at all? You'll see in the video, the principal video, that substituting is not really a good use of your time. And we put it in the video specifically because it happens all the time. But you should be the 10th person they call on to substitute, not the first. Hard sell, but important to really talk to principals about. I don't know how you and your district are documenting your time, but it's important to have a way of documenting your time. This is one that was created by AMA ESD that is available for everybody to use. It goes by date, how much time you spent, in what grade level, on what essential and what coaching activities. And there's a really great summary piece. So it shows you, oh, I'm doing a lot of modeling. How am I moving on? Or I'm doing a lot of observation, but I don't have a lot of conferences afterward. I need to make sure that for every observation, I have a conference. So this is just one that's available. Your district may use something else, but check with your coordinator about how you're expected to keep track of your time, and in a way that's useful for you to make those decisions about, are you spending enough time with teachers? This is just a little plug. Remember, we were talking about the trajectory, and that right now you're onboarding and you're going to start doing the instructional modules. But in January, we're going to start some study groups, and December would be a good time to register for them. These study groups usually focus on how to integrate coaching with the instructional models. So you're coaching around the instructional practices. And we have one on Essential 3, small group work, number 5 on phonics, and number 6 on writing. So think about that, something you can do. There's 6 sessions, and something that you can do in January or February as part of your professional learning. So my final thoughts are, take the time to build the strong foundation. I heard in one group that their district has really done a good job of setting them up for success in this way. Move toward coaching about school-wide and teacher-specific goals by November, and don't overschedule yourself. If you've promised to be someplace, make sure you're there and you come prepared. So you need to have some preparation time in your schedule, or you'll get to feel overwhelmed. But this is a good time to really think through, how much prep time do I need to model before I model, or before I co-teach, or before I have a conference. You need prep time in your day to do those things. So I hope that some of these ideas are helping you think about how you can get off to a great start this year. And I think, Erin, you're going to take it.